Have you ever felt trapped? Even when there was nothing holding you back, the Pink Panther too. But in her case, the bars didn't even exist. They were all created in her head. And the funniest part, she'll try to escape in every way possible, climbing, digging, biting, until she discovered that the key had been with her all along. It was a perfect day in the forest. The sky was clear, the trees swayed gently in the wind, and birds sang in harmony. The Pink Panther walked with her calm and elegant manner, enjoying the scenery as if she had entered a secret paradise. But something seemed off. Despite all the beauty around her, her body was tense, her gaze restless, as if expecting something to go wrong at any moment. She took short steps and constantly glanced around even though she saw no danger. As she walked deeper into the forest, a strange sensation overcame her. Suddenly, without warning, she felt something surrounding her. She tried to move forward but bumped into something invisible. She took another step and felt the barrier again. It was as if she were inside a cage made of air. She reached out, touched the nothingness, and felt the resistance. No one else would see it, but to her, those invisible bars were real. The expression on her face was a mix of confusion and irritation, as if wondering why it always happens only to her. The panther took a few steps back, and with her characteristic humor, did everything she could to free herself. She tried to crawl, squeezed along the sides, jumped to see if the bars ended at the top, and even tried blowing to see if they would disappear. Nothing worked. Each failed attempt made her more determined, but also funnier to the onlookers. There was something deeply human in that moment, being in a beautiful place, but unable to enjoy it because of a fear only she felt. The forest remained calm, but the panther seemed trapped in a silent storm within her own mind. With a resigned sigh, she sat on the ground, leaning her back against the invisible barrier. The contrast was striking. Outside, the world remained colorful and free. Inside, the prison only she could see. Little did the panther know that this cage was made not of iron or glass, but of thoughts she herself believed to be true. And there began her journey to discover if she could escape something that perhaps had never truly existed. After realizing she was surrounded by invisible bars, the Pink Panther decided she wouldn't just sit around and wait for the problem to go away. She slowly stood up, looked around, and began to devise elaborate plans. The first was simple: push through with brute force. She placed both hands on the invisible wall and made a face of effort like a superhero. Nothing happened. Next, she tried to dig a tunnel to escape underneath using a twig as a makeshift shovel. The result? The twig broke, and she ended up with her face covered in dirt, looking at the camera with a mixture of irritation and embarrassment. Not satisfied, she decided to use her peculiar creativity. She grabbed a hanging vine and tried to swing over the railings. For a second, it seemed like it would work. She rose into the air elegantly and landed spectacularly on the ground on the same side she was on. Total silence, only the sound of a leaf falling on her head. The classic panther's silent humor was there, mixed with a powerful message. When the mind creates barriers, no amount of physical effort seems enough to break through them. While she struggled against the bars only she could see, other animals passed calmly through the forest. Rabbits, birds, and even a deer crossed their path without noticing anything strange. They laughed, played, and went about their normal lives. The panther, however, believed everyone was watching her. Her ears drooped, her eyes narrowed, and she tried to hide behind a tree, believing every distant chuckle was about her failed attempts. In a subtle touch of humor, she even places a branch over her head to pretend to be a tree and spends a few seconds completely still, as if this would render her invisible. Of course, no one was paying attention to her, but in the panther's mind, the whole world was judging her. The metaphor is clear. Often the fear of what others think holds us back more than any real barrier. The forest remained vibrant and peaceful. Only in the panther's mind was chaos. If you've ever felt trapped in a cage that only you could see, you know how hard it is to escape. But Panther is here to show with humor and heart that there is a way. Write in the comments, I've already seen my Barsan share this story with someone who needs a reminder that the hardest barriers to break down are within ourselves. And don't forget to subscribe to future episodes. Maybe the next one will help you break down yours. Sitting on the ground, exhausted from trying to escape, the Pink Panther closed her eyes for a moment. The silence of the forest was so profound she could hear her own heartbeat. Then a gentle wind began to blow, unlike the one that had come before. Instead of pushing, it seemed to caress. Light leaves began to swirl in the air and catch on the invisible bars, revealing something the panther had never noticed. Words were written on the leaves. She slowly stood up and brought her face closer to read. On each page were phrases like, "You're not good enough. They'll laugh at you. No one wants you here." The shock was immediate. The bars weren't made of iron but of thoughts. The prison wasn't in the world but in the mind. The panther took a deep breath, touched one of the bars, and to her surprise it crumbled like dust. With a mixture of amazement and silent humor, she clapped her hands to see if it worked again. It did. Another section of the bars disappeared. Excited, she began to dance, spin, and touch every spot, each touch dissolving another piece of the invisible prison. The scene began to change. The colors began to shine again. The sound of birds filled the air and the forest seemed alive again. This moment marked the beginning of liberation. The panther hadn't conquered the wind or broken any walls, but she had done something far more powerful, realizing that the walls were illusions created by her own fears. And when this truth was revealed, the path to freedom opened before her, silent and full of meaning. As the last fragment of the invisible grid dissolved into thin air, the Pink Panther stood still for a moment in disbelief. She looked around, took a hesitant step, and realized something that left her motionless. There was nothing holding her back, never had been. The forest, which had once seemed like a maze, now opened before her in colors brighter than ever. The wind, which had previously sounded menacing, now merely swayed the leaves in a gentle rhythm, almost like music. She began to walk, slowly at first, and then to run. Each step felt lighter, as if an invisible weight had been lifted from her shoulders. In a moment of pure humor and relief, she stopped in the middle of a clearing, spread her arms and began to dance awkwardly, mixing improvised steps with amused grimaces for no one but herself. The scene was silent, but it said it all. The freedom she sought was never outside, but within. Animals passing through the forest stopped to watch, but not with judgment, with admiration. The rabbit clapped its hands, the bird sang louder, and even the deer tilted its head curiously. The panther, no longer bothered by the stares of others, simply continued to dance, twirling among flowers and golden leaves that fell from the sky like natural confetti. As the sun began to set, the panther stopped, took a deep breath, and gazed at the horizon. A silent smile appeared on her face, reflecting the peace she felt. She understood that the bars could never again imprison her in the same way, because now she knew they only existed if she believed in them. And with this discovery, she continued walking into the forest, free to live her life without the barriers that once seemed insurmountable. As the Pink Panther leaned exhausted against the invisible barrier, the silence of the forest was broken by a soft, almost hypnotic sound. A different wind began to blow. It wasn't the aggressive wind that had been pushing her back before, but a calm breeze, almost whispering. The surrounding leaves began to swirl in the air, and little by little began to stick to the invisible bars, as if revealing something that had always been hidden. As she touched the bars, the leaves glowed golden, revealing words written on them. "They will laugh at you. You don't belong here. Everyone is judging you." The panther's eyes widened and she took a step back in shock. It was the first time she had clearly seen what was keeping her trapped. They weren't metal walls nor magical barriers. They were thoughts, inner voices she'd carried for so long, they felt real. Curious, she touched one of the words and to her surprise it vanished like dust in the wind. She touched another, and the same thing happened. A subtle smile appeared on the panther's face, one of those silent smiles that blends relief and humor. She reveled in the discovery and began touching each leaf, one by one like popping bubbles. With each touch, a part of the prison disappeared, and the space around her became wider, lighter, more alive. The scene was mesmerizing. The wind scattered. The words as they faded, and the sound of birds returned in the background, as if the entire forest were celebrating silent liberation. For the first time, the panther wasn't afraid of the wind. She danced with it, letting it carry away everything that had never been real. With each word that crumbled beneath her touch, the Pink Panther began to realize something transformative. The cage had never been solid. It was like mist, held together only by the fears she herself held. And the more she challenged those words, the more fragile they became. In a curious moment, she braced herself with both hands and pushed slowly. To her surprise, a section of the grate simply disappeared, opening a gap that revealed the undistorted forest for the first time. The panther's eyes gleamed. She bent down to take a closer look, poked her head out of the opening, and stood still, as if seeing a new world for the first time. Outside, nothing had changed. The forest was still beautiful. The animals continued their peaceful routines, and no one seemed to be paying her any attention. The contrast was stark. All the fear that held her captive existed only within her. With quiet humor, she tried to climb out of the gap with an exaggerated step, as if testing its safety. First one foot, then the other, but she ended up tripping and falling face first into the grass. Silence. Then she stood up, dusted herself off, and smiled to herself. That half-embarrassed, half-relieved smile that only appears when you realize the enemy holding you back was invisible. The bars began to disappear faster, one by one, as if her courage had accelerated the entire process. Each step toward freedom felt like a plunge into a new world, and this time, she didn't want to go back inside. The space that had once felt like a prison now became an invitation to dance in what had always been within her reach: freedom itself. The Pink Panther took a deep breath as she faced the newly opened gap. There was something different in the air outside, fresher, more vibrant, almost as if the entire forest were waiting for her. With slow, almost unsteady steps, she stepped through the first opening, and to her surprise, nothing happened. No danger, no judgment, no threatening sounds, just the soft chirping of birds and the rustling of leaves. As she advanced, more invisible barriers dissolved with the simple touch of her hands. It was like walking through a smokescreen. Each step forward was a silent victory. The forest became more colorful, the trees greener and the sky bluer with each barrier she tore down. There was a growing sense of lightness, as if the weight she carried on her shoulders was finally lifting. In a subtle touch of humor, the panther, thrilled with the freedom she felt, attempted a triumphant leap off the final barrier and ended up tripping on a root in the ground. The fall was spectacular, but the scene remained silent, as always. She quickly got up, dusted herself off, and bowed to an unseen audience, as if she had planned that fall from the beginning. When she finally made it all the way through, the panther stopped and looked back. There were no more bars, no markings, no indication that she had ever been trapped. Just the forest, beautiful and peaceful, always open. What had changed wasn't the place, but the way she saw it. And in that instant, she understood. The way out had never been blocked. She just had to believe she could walk it. As the Pink Panther took her. Last step outside, a different silence filled the room. It wasn't the heavy silence she'd felt inside the invisible cage, but a light, peaceful silence. The air seemed cleaner, the sky wider, and the forest more vibrant than ever. Every color seemed to vibrate as if the world had just awakened with her. It was as if freedom had always been there, just waiting for her to open her eyes and see. She looked back and saw the space where she had once believed herself trapped. There were no bars, no markings on the ground, just the same open, serene field that had been there all along. A silent smile appeared on her face. It was the smile of someone finally understanding that the prison was never real, but an illusion created by fears and insecurities. In a characteristic moment of humor, The panther picks up a branch from the ground and begins to draw in the air, imitating the bars that once held him captive, as if mocking them. He grimaces at the empty space and takes a step forward, exaggerating as if to say, "Now there's no turning back." Other animals approach, curious but not to judge, just to observe the panther's silent dance of relief and joy. They didn't see a prisoner escaping. They saw someone breaking free from something that was never there in the first place. This contrast is powerful. The world hasn't changed, but the way she saw it has. From that moment on, the forest ceased to be a place of fear and became a space of possibilities. And, with a firm and calm step, Panthera moved forward, ready to live without the shackles she once believed were unbreakable. With each step away from the space where she believed herself trapped, the Pink Panther felt the weight lift. The wind that had once seemed like an enemy now danced with her, swaying the leaves like a silent melody. Without realizing it, she began to spin in the middle of the clearing, improvising clumsy steps, a mixture of joy and relief. There was no one to applaud, but for the first time she didn't care. She was free. Not because the world had changed, but because she had changed within. The entire forest seemed different. The colors were brighter, the birdsong sweeter, and even the ground, once hard and cold, now felt soft beneath her feet. Animals passing by watched her with curiosity and admiration. They had never seen bars, never judged her. All that fear existed only within her. The panther stopped, took a deep breath, and smiled. There was nothing left to hold on to. No walls to face, no fear to believe. With one last look at the sky, the panther raised her arms and let the wind carry her in one last dance. There, in that moment, she understood something she would never forget. Freedom had always been there, waiting for her to believe in herself enough to see it. If you've ever felt trapped in something no one else could see, you know how hard it is to believe you can escape. This story of the panther shows that sometimes the strongest bars aren't around us, but inside us. And if you've also broken one of these invisible bars, leave a comment below. I found my freedom. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message and subscribe to the channel to follow other silent stories that can change the way you see life, one story at a time.